Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
So, talking about autopilot, right? I love talking about autopilot. Autopilot is something that exists, right, on airplanes to make life easier for pilots. And it helps them get to the destination faster, more efficiently,
Right.
and all those things. And I was thinking about this, and as we were talking about this, it's interesting how our lives have they take on their own autopilot.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about habits before. We've talked about all those things. James Clear talks a lot about this in The Power of Habit.
Yeah.
Where we get in these loops.
Yeah.
These autopilot loops.
Yep.
And they can be good because they can increase our efficiency.
Yeah.
But when they're not producing the results that we want, the things we're really after, that's when, we need to figure out what to do to fix those.
Yeah. And this podcast, it's a little bit on habits, but not specifically on habits.
Right.
And like you said, just to reiterate, habits and systems and all that are super important for success. The problem is most people, their habits are by default. So as they're growing up, as they're a teenager, as they're being influenced by other people, if they're not around the people that are successful, they pick up on the habits of unsuccessful people, right?
Yeah.
And that, anybody has kids, if you're a good parent, you're going to say, hey, I want my kids around the right people, the right kids, the right families. That's why my kid went through one of my kids went through private school. That's why your girls go through private school, because you want to give them a leg up and be around people, like-minded people, for success. Yeah. So this idea that we are on autopilot, like you said, we have to kind of step back and say, okay, is it going in the direction that we want to go? Is it serving me? Am I seeing success in the areas that I want to see success in? Is my life going in the right direction? And if any of those answers are, well, maybe, or a definite no, then this is the podcast for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great lead in. And I love coffee. I make my coffee the same way every morning.
Yeah.
And that's a pattern, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's a pattern.
There you go. I got one too.
And if the coffee doesn't taste good, right? If the coffee tastes great, that's awesome. That's autopilot. I don't have to think about it. I just continue going. But if the coffee doesn't taste good, I need to look at that pattern and I need to figure out what part I can fix, improve, change to help me, get it correct.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And I think what we're talking about today is 3 quick pattern interrupts, so things that are going to, not necessarily the specific thing you have to change, but the thing you have to do in yourself to know, to start making that move towards changing patterns that you've built.
Yeah. And this is something that we teach in the martial arts to our instructors. How do you interrupt the pattern, especially when you're dealing with kids and you're dealing with young kids? You have to interrupt their pattern of their behavior, and how do you do it effectively, and then to change it and mold it and push it into the direction that you want it to go, so that way you have a very productive class. But it works on us too, and as adults and as young adults listening to this, we have to get good at interrupting our own pattern. We have to first recognize it, of course, that we're in a wrong pattern, and then we're going to show you the 3 steps. They're going to help you interrupt that effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get right into the steps. So, I think number 1, when you find yourself in those patterns and you're looking at a pattern, is ask yourself an interrupting question.
Right.
Ask yourself something like, what's the next best move I can make? But really putting like a pointed question at yourself. I know a lot of times with patterns, what happens is people get into these spirals. You know what I mean?
Right.
They start overthinking and they start going through all these emotions. And, one of the quickest ways that we know out of emotion is starting to take action. And the only way to take positive action, you taught me this a long time ago, is to ask a quality question.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really important step.
Yeah, it is. And one of the questions I have that I tell our instructors to do, and I use myself, is a simple question when you're at work doing stuff. Is this the best use of my time right now? What a great question. What a great pattern interrupt, because you could be doing something that you think is a priority, or even something that needs to be done, but does it
Yeah.
need to be done right now? You know what I mean? Like if you have customers in front of you, let's say you own a business or even you're working at a business, and the customers in front of you, what's the most important thing to do? Is it to do that inventory, or is it to serve those customers in front of you?
Right.
Does the inventory need to be done? Absolutely needs to be done. But what's most important right now is those people in front of you, you know,
Yeah.
and you see that unfortunately too often in other businesses. You walk in, they're talking, they're talking to their coworkers. And in the dojo, what happens if we're at the front desk and we're talking back and forth? As soon as somebody walks up, what do we both do?
Stop.
We instantly stop talking to each other, even if we're in a mid conversation,
Yeah.
which we are many times, and we focus on them. I mean, that's just part of our training, what we do. I wish all businesses were like that, because then that shows the customer, in this case, our students and families, that they're the most important thing, because they are.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the things that this always makes me think of, this interrupting question is, people who worry, people who have anxiety, when you get news or when you hear of something or when you think of something, that's maybe leaning towards more negative, one of the best things you can ask yourself is, what good can come out of this?
Yeah.
How can this be a benefit? What can I
Mm-hmm.
learn from this? And because I think we get in these patterns where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna think about a thing, then I'm going to get nervous, then I'm going to go to the refrigerator and stand there and,
Mm-hmm.
eat, even though I'm not hungry because I got feelings and I'm trying to stuff them down. And
Yep.
all of those, those are just patterns, right? And we know
Yep.
we have them. But I think asking those interrupting questions it gets you out of your head and it gets you into action. It gets you
Yep.
into moving forward.
Yep. Another question I'll ask is this going to be important next week, or is this going to be important next month, or is
Hmm.
this going to be important next year? So when something bad happens, putting it into perspective, is it really bad?
Hmm.
Somebody has a horrible car accident. Okay, that's really bad. Are they alive? Okay, that's great. Are they able to move? They just need healing. Okay, so we can
Yeah.
deal with that.
Hmm.
Obviously, if it's something more than that, then there's going to be different questions. But oftentimes, our daily life is just little things. Somebody cut us off in traffic. What does that mean? That person probably doesn't even know you're alive. Doesn't even know
Yeah.
you exist. They didn't do it to you. They just did it.
Hmm.
You know. Um, so those things can really help keep joy in your
Yeah.
in your day
Yeah.
by asking yourself the right questions, instead of why does this always happen to me. Is one of the worst questions you can ever ask yourself, because your brain is going to come up with all the negative reasons why it always happens to you. That's a victim mentality, a loser thinking. You have to grow beyond that with in your mind with these questions.
Hmm.
So you mentioned it earlier, but empowering questions, and I'm sure we did a podcast on it, so I'll link it in the show notes. That's a great episode, the empowering questions, because that will help you with this, and
Yeah.
it'll expand on this action step number one.
Yep, 100%. Getting into action step number two, because I love this one. And this is, something that's so easy to do. It's something that, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you get to one of those patterns where you get frustrated, or you get to one of those patterns where you feel stuck today,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that is, it's so easy. And that's just changing your environment.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I mean, what I think is cool about this is it can be as easy as go into a different room in the house. I
Yeah.
mean, literally, like if you work from home, grab your laptop and move to it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a beautiful day today. Go outside with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be changing your environment, going to a coffee shop. It can be just really just shake things up,
Right.
visually for yourself.
Yeah, I think this is very important, and I think a lot of people know about this, but just because we know something doesn't mean we take action on it. And
Yeah.
oftentimes that's usually the case. How many adults know what to do, know how to get in shape, know how to get successful, know how to save money, but they don't. So I think changing the environment. That's why, um, if you get in shape at your own house, at home, absolutely, right. And I've done it
Hmm.
for many times. But my best workouts, very rarely were they ever alone. Let's say
Right.
my top 10 workouts in the past year, I don't think any of the 10 were on my own, right? They were
Right.
with somebody else. And so that's an idea that's changing my environment. So if I want a better workout, I need to change my environment. If I want a better outcome with something, changing my environment. Now, if the environment's working, that's great. But oftentimes I've noticed that something's working until it doesn't work. For whatever reason that is, a little change in the environment for a little bit makes it all better. Just like the weather, when the weather is nice out, we all naturally feel better. That doesn't mean we can't feel good when the weather's crappy out either. We just have to make sure that we're adjusting
You know,
properly.
like one of the things I really like about this is, I mean, have you ever been sitting there just frustrated and just not even moved, but just stopped and took a deep breath
Right.
and kind of just put yourself in the moment you're in,
Yeah.
and stop worrying about what's ahead, stop thinking about what happened, but just that deep breath, changing your state a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and because I mean, yes, there's physical change. We can go to a different place, we can go to a different location, but there's also just that ability for us to change our mental and our physical environment,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with standing up with good posture, taking focusing our
Right.
body, our breathing, all those things. It can almost have that same, if not better, effect. And if you do both, if you go outside
Right.
for a quick walk and you change your state by checking your posture, checking your
Yeah.
breathing, um, it just changes your whole outlook on situations and helps.
Yeah, it does. And those mini breaks, and that could be another version of changing your environment. Let's say you've been working. You take a 5-minute walk, you go outside for 5 minutes, you stand in the sun. I like to stand in the sun and do the open. I don't know. I'm sure there's a yoga pose. I do yoga, but I don't know any of the names
That's fine.
of the poses, right?
Very hard to
Uh,
do.
yeah. So I'll do that and just do it for 2 or 3 minutes, and what a difference I feel. Right
Hmm.
in the sun, face it, all of that. So that can be a pattern for sure.
Yeah.
I know it works for me, and that's changing my environment. And it's only for, like I said, 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm back to work. And so these are things I think we've all kind of know this. We just don't put it together to do it
Right.
oftentimes. Yeah.
And I mean, I think this guides into number three, and I know this is going to sound odd to some people, but I think these things are connected. And the last one is building an anchor phrase.
Yeah.
Building an anchor phrase, like a word that you say when you feel yourself getting into the pattern,
Hmm.
to remind yourself, that you're doing it, right? To
Right.
pull yourself out of it. And I think what I like about anchor phrases is it anchors in that change of environment. It anchors in
Hmm.
that question. And what it does is it puts you back in that moment where you're working on changing yourself and changing the pattern.
Right.
So
Yep.
saying things like, I got this, right?
Yep.
And making that the pattern interrupted. Every time you go into this state, you're going to say, I got this,
Hmm.
right? Things like that, just they make it so much easier to snap back to that moment.
Right. Right. I remember when I was going for my first degree black belt, long time ago. I'm trying to think how many years ago it's been, but it's been a while. Um, my phrase was, "I'm a black belt. I'm a black belt. I'm a black belt." So I did this mostly when I was running, because running was tough for me
Yeah,
early on. If you remember the requirements of 3 miles in under 21 minutes, that's fast. 7 minute
yeah,
mile, and then the test, and everybody famously says, I would go to school uphill both ways. Well, this actually was a 3 mile check, and I think where it is. Off of
yeah,
370, and it was a different start and end. So it ended differently. And it literally there was one part downhill in the first half mile, and the rest was all uphill. And he still had to be under 21 minutes. So that,
yeah,
so that was my black belt test that I was working towards. So I did it, but it took me a while. It took me months of training to be able to get to that. So I remember me saying that my mantra when I was running is, I'm a black belt, I'm a black belt. And especially when it got tough, that's what I would tell myself. And I think it made a difference, because it made me focus on my breathing, and made me focus my mind on what I really wanted versus how sucky it was at the time.
yeah, yeah.
You know?
And there's so much power in saying things out loud. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a classic Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah.
Incantations, like in your head when you
Yep.
say things, it's
Hmm.
great. Like it's
Yep.
better than not saying it. But when you
Right.
say things out loud, and your ears hear your mouth say it, it just
Right.
has so much more of an impact on your
Hmm.
state.
It does. It does. So I don't discount this. Don't discount anchor
Yeah.
phrases. Don't look at them as like, oh, that doesn't work, because they do. They do.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to make it personal. You can borrow from somebody. A lot of people have really good ones, but make it your own. Make it something that works for you, and then anchor it in. And if the key to this is you need to anchor it when you're emotional. In
Yeah.
a positive state. That's how it works. Like you mentioned, Anthony Robbins. I mean, this is one of the big things he did, and he still does to a certain extent, but definitely years ago. And then anytime you are going to do the fire walk, you have to get in a state and you have a power move and to get yourself rallied up. But I know anytime that I do any talks um, in front of people, and even when I teach class, I make sure that I'm getting pumped up. So I'm going out there with energy, going out there with passion, because that's what you should do. So if you can build in an anchor that your body and mind instantly get into that state, it's like breaking boards. You've broken boards. You can't just the flimsy boards are fine, but I mean the real boards, if you don't hit them right, it's going to hurt, especially if you're doing multiple boards.
Yeah.
They're real. It's something that you have to make sure that you're focused in order to break it, and especially if it's more of a complex kick break where you actually have to focus a kick in the right spot. So these are things that we teach in the martial arts, but certainly can translate into the regular world very, very easily and be very effective for you.
Yeah, and I think what you said is absolutely right. I mean, I think when I think mastery of pattern interrupt is doing it before you even get into the pattern.
Right.
So because what you'll find is you start getting into that little mental spiral, and then
Mm-hmm.
somewhere about 3/4 of the way in, you ask yourself the question, or you change your environment, or you do,
Mm-hmm.
you make the anchor phrase happen.
Right.
But what'll happen is, gradually you'll say, okay, this is what triggers this thing.
Right.
And before I even get there, right? Before I even step out on stage, before I
Mm-hmm.
even, sit down at the phone to start making my phone calls, I'm going to use this anchor phrase to get
Right.
myself there before
Right.
I even give myself the ability to get into that old pattern.
Right.
And that's how we start to develop those new patterns, and that's how we start to develop
Mm-hmm.
new progress. So I think that's a great one.
Yeah, and it's going to take work. If you have some negative patterns, some negative way of thinking, it's not going to be easy, but it's simple,
Yeah.
right? Simple doesn't equal easy, but the good thing is simple. These are the steps. This is what you do. You use these 3 steps, and then you just have to be consistent with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that. You just have to make it happen.
And you can use them today.
And you
Now.
can use them when?
Now.
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 When can I achieve results?
Exclamation.
Now.
All right, so let's review our steps to
Okay.
interrupting our patterns to get a better mood, better mindset, better
Mm-hmm.
momentum. Number 1, ask yourself an interrupting question. Things like, is this the best thing I can be doing right now?
Right. Mm-hmm.
How can I benefit from this? What good can come from this? Ask yourself those empowering questions.
Number 2 is changing your environment on purpose. So going for a walk, just standing in the sun, going to a different room, going to a different place to work out, to work, to read, to write, whatever the case is. Doing that can definitely, especially if you're in a funk, can help you get out of it.
Yeah. And then number 3, use an anchor phrase. Something like, let's go. I got this. Bonus, clap your hands when you do it. It adds
Yeah.
so much more. It's going to be a great day. Clap your hands.
Right.
That way you get that full emotional feel into it, but use that anchor phrase to cap it off. And that wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please share this with somebody who could use a pattern interrupt, and we will catch you on the next show.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.